Hey there. For those of you who are joining, we're just waiting a minute or two for folks to log in. We can probably get underway. This is being recorded, I think. Yes, so we will be able to share the recording if anybody does arrive late, or if you guys want to watch this amazing webinar again later at your pleasure, you can do that. So we'll get underway. Thanks everybody for attending today's webinar on Snowflake Native CI/CD Masterclass. Speed control and no custom development, and really excited to showcase this for you guys. My name is Keith Belanger. I'm the field CTO and Snowflake data superhero here at DataOps.live. I'm been in the data industry about 29 years, most of that actually as a practitioner, leveraging these tools. I've been using Snowflake for about 7 years, I think it is now. So I'm excited to bring this to you and welcome my colleague here, friend, Chris, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, yeah. So I'm Chris Atkinson, and I'm one of the principal data cloud architects here at Snowflake. And yeah, I've had the pleasure of working with the DataOps.live folks now for, my God, almost a day. I think I joined Snowflake, so about 5 or 6 years ago now. So yeah, nice to
Excellent.
see you.
Nice to have you with us. All right. I'll let you go at it, Chris.
Yeah, so I guess kicking it off. So just before we dive into the agenda and whatnot, is it's worth pointing out that Snowflake has made a significant investment in DataOps.live. We've made this investment. It's a staggered investment over a 3-year period. And what we're going to be covering today are actually the first two drops, if you like, from that investment. These are focusing on enterprise-wide CI/CD on Snowflake, of course, and also enterprise-ready dbt. And I believe what we're going to be covering today, if I'm not wrong, Keith, is all around kind of the first pieces on enterprise CI/CD.
Exactly.
So yeah, so that's very worth mentioning, and we'll go into a little bit more later on of why we've made that investment. It'll become apparent to you where the gaps are, if you like, on Snowflake's platform that DataOps.live make us complete with. And with that, Keith, do you want to start look at the agenda and tell them
Yeah,
what we're going over?
absolutely. Today we're going to cover what we're hearing from Snowflake customers, what they're desiring from us. We're going to review an actual customer use case that we've had. I'm going to introduce dynamic delivery. I'm going to do a live demo. We're going to talk about Snowflake's usage of DataOps.live, and then we'll wrap things up. One thing I do want to state is I have it here. Please ask questions. We do have Tony on with us from our customer support team. And so if you have any questions as we're going through, I think inside here there should be Q&A or the chat. I'm not seeing the Q&A. Maybe it's just me, or you could use the chat.
There is one
But
there. I can see
yeah,
it. Yeah.
so yeah, post any questions. Chris and I will continue on our way, but Tony is with us to kind of help answer any questions that folks may have. So
Okay, great stuff.
great.
So I guess maybe the starting point then is, what we often see when we're talking to. Do you want to just move to the next slide, Keith? Yeah. What we're often talking when we talk to our customers, Snowflake customers, it's the thing that they're looking for, right? When they're looking at engineering, developing pipelines, so on and so forth, and CI/CD processes in general. There's pretty much a consistent message that we get back of what businesses want to achieve. First of all, they're looking at dev productivity. They really want their developers, their engineers to be able to work independently, be empowered to work independently. But of course, all of that independence does come with a little bit of a bottleneck at the end of that, which is how do you then merge those efforts together and do that and enable collaboration in such a way that it doesn't hamper the quality of the work that's being done independently, but at the same time does facilitate that. We also look for towards the to outcomes focused around end users, the end user productivity of the platform. We need to automate testing. We want to establish standards for those tests, and we want to enforce those across the organization as well. And that kind of also leads in quite strongly to what we see with cross-project collaboration. People want reusability. But whilst they want that reusability, they also want to enforce governance across the business. They want to maintain autonomy, and potentially a really good example of that would be data mesh, right? If you think about creating data products, enforcing governance over those data products, whilst maintaining the autonomy of the different groups that exist within your business. And then ultimately, you can probably tie all three of these together under the business productivity heading, really, which is businesses want to go faster. We are certainly seeing an acceleration in the amount of change and the amount of data pipeline change, not that it wasn't already insignificant, related to AI. And that's kind of, I think, a significant driver right now. But it's never been quiet for the data engineers, the data scientists, and all the ML AI guys, right? And Keith, I don't know whether you'd add anything here.
Yeah, I mean, the things that I'll add is what we have definitely seen. I mean, God, I can remember when, hey, we're delivering once a week, and that was, sufficient. That was fine. But that's not really what we're seeing anymore. People are trying to build data products, get those products into production as quickly as they can, but at the same time you don't want to relinquish your, like you said, the governance, the testing, and how do you add speed to that. And then AI, as you just mentioned, is really a hot topic. And as you know, if you're doing things with AI, if you're not keeping that data, that quality and that up to date and accurate, and making those adjustments, then you can really tail off. So, we're seeing that no longer are where the capabilities we used to have good enough, right? We now need to improve those capabilities to be organizations to have, you said, collaboration, the productivity and have speed to
Yeah.
go along with that. So how do you do that, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think most of what we've spoken about so far in this webinar, we're only a few minutes in, let's be honest. But I mean, Keith and I, we've got a background with dirty fingernails to prove it at the coalface of this. And when we were talking about what we wanted to cover today and the subjects we wanted to cover with you, we wanted to make it real. We wanted to make sure that we showed you what this is all about, but also talk about real customers and how they went about it. So I think, with that in mind, let's skip ahead to the next slide and really, what is it that, let's make this real. Where has this been done before, and what does it look like? Well, this was one of DataOps.live's customers, right? And Keith, do you just want to talk a little bit about this? I don't think this was anything out of the ordinary, not from what I've seen anyway, in terms of objectives and outcomes.
No, I mean, this was a very, very large global Fortune 100 communications giant. Everybody's familiar with them. And a lot of the things we talked about on that previous screen, they really starting to feel some of that pain. These were kind of three high level points that they really brought to the table with us, right? Is they want to drive additional revenue and cost savings by leveraging their Snowflake investment and getting more use cases out there. They were feeling that pain. They want to automate everything, right? The only way you can get speed is with automation. And so they were currently around 40 to 70% of having manual stitched together processes, whether it was around environment management, testing, version control, code promotion, and rollback, right? So you get to a certain point where you can't go much faster. You're just getting in your own way. And they wanted to enable their developers to do the tasks that needed to be done in minutes and hours versus weeks and hundreds of manual tasks. And, I can speak for myself. I've been in their shoes where, you have to wait for Bob because he's the one who can only push the button, or you have to go and enter this into an Excel spreadsheet so you can update a table. All of these manual processes in this use case in this particular client was kind of at you know, their breaking point where something had to change, right? They had to make a change in order to squeeze more juice out of what they were doing.
And you mentioned developers, right? But it wasn't really. I mean, that's the ideal world, isn't it? Which is,
Yeah.
our pipeline engineers and developers were the guys who were just doing the only guys who were doing the pipeline work. But that wasn't the case, was it? That was
No, I mean,
Declan.
This is your CDOs and these are your directors who are, they're the ones who are interacting with the customers a lot saying, we want more, we want more. Well, I can't go and say, I'm going to hire, 50 more people, or I'm not going to. So you got that leadership level that says, we need to get more out of our developers, and maybe taking away some of those mundane tasks that are on our developers so that they could do their job. So it really was also a top-down recognition that something needs to change, right?
Right. And it wasn't just developers though, was it? Unfortunately, because of the amount of work that was going on here, the data scientists were ending up having to do some of this orchestration work. The data engineers were already doing it, but other people were leaning in and actually basically doing what a lot of people do, which is getting stuck in, right, trying to solve the problem. But it wasn't really their job to solve, was my
Right.
understanding.
No, you want your data engineers, right? Your data scientists, working with data solutions. You don't want them doing DevOps tasks, right?
Yeah.
I've seen, a top data engineer having to be working on writing, GitHub actions, right? Or I'm going to write a Python script to do some level of automation, and that's taken away from them doing data stuff. They might enjoy it, might think it's fun, but um, it's not what their day job is to do. And then, well, do I go get some DevOps peoples to help? And they're not familiar with Snowflake. So you get in
Yeah.
this scenario where you're trying to force your way along, and causes a lot of friction, and it slows you down.
So that's the outcome they were after. What did they actually get to? What did the metrics look like at the end of this?
Yeah. So, they saw great results in using our solution. So they had improved developer productivity was a big thing for them, right? They were able to test, run, and debug in seconds and not minutes. So, well, what do we mean by that? Well, as we show in our pipelines, you can embed testing over and over again. So you might have a senior architect says that I want this testing done on every single pipeline, and don't have to expect every developer to write it, right? It's like, no, we're going to put that in. So now these tests are automatically done. Big thing, which we'll even showcase today, is zero install, right? You didn't have to procure a solution and then stand up, AWS infrastructure and then have somebody deploy and install and maintain that. You know, we are native to Snowflake, and you're up and running with Snowflake in a matter of minutes, underway.
Okay.
Um, they saw 10x developer productivity. So we're talking about developers doing non-developing work, and it says here generically developer. We're really specifically talking about here is the data engineer, right? The data engineer doing data engineering work, not so. Then they saw, hey, we have an increase in 10x of our productivity of our data engineer by them not having to do these outstanding tasks. Um, you can add people to the team and to like instantly, right? You can just say, hey, I want to add this person to our work group or our squad. And it's not a huge effort to add new people into the solution. I think a big one for me that I thought here in the lower left is the increase, they say 10x decrease, sorry, in incident resolution. What they mean by that is you're building data products and you're delivering it to your customer, that they had a decrease in, for lack of better words, the complaints in the data products that they were deploying. So the organization's the usage and the adoption, the customer satisfaction goes up because you're able to put in more controls, that might not have been placed in before when you were doing in a very manual intensive perspective. And ultimately, they saw a 50% reduction in their time to production. So I think that's huge. And that's not without adding more people. That's just what's like, hey, let's take the people we have and add some automation to it. So, and this is not what I wrote. This is literally me copying and pasting what this customer gave to us, right? So this is a real use case and scenario where they had an objective they want and the results that they got from adopting this solution.
Okay. So let's move on to kind of how they got there, and where they came from. I think that's kind of interesting, right? It's all very good. I'm quite
Yeah.
pragmatic, because lots of people on this call. It's very good saying 50% reduction, but if they were only spending 50p a week, it wasn't really that big a problem, was it?
Right. Right.
So I think most people on this call will understand firsthand where they were, because I would expect that unless they are actually a DataOps.live customer, they're probably doing it this way. So yeah, I mean, this way is really, well, to be honest, it's using Snowflake's platform as is. And as a Snowflake employee, I'm quite bullish about what our platform is capable of doing. It has amazing features and capabilities. Um, but when it comes to CI/CD processes and managing pipelines, so on and so forth, as much as we provide the platform, we don't really provide you with much else. So you have to do a bunch of other stuff yourself to facilitate that. So some of you, and this was the case with this customer, I understand, which were using basically custom-made stuff, code, Python, SQL, in order to facilitate basically the building of these environments, the usage of snapshots and clones basically within Snowflake to move across environments. Different developers working on different branches require that. If you want those developers to work on different pieces of code, then you're going to be working on different copies of the data, so on and so forth. And some of this we do really, really well. But ultimately, those developers will be working in their own environments. They'll be working on their own branches, and you need a mechanism for facilitating that collaboration. And that means facilitating a few different things, right? You need to be able to merge the collaborative work at the end of each developer's engineering effort that traverses across things like function, code-based objects, so functions, procedures, Streamlit apps, native app manifests, the list goes on. But there's also a whole bunch of account level objects that you also need to think about, policies, account objects. How do you do that? And the easy way on the face of it would be, well, I'll just keep creating scripts to do every time I create an object, I'm going to add something to my script. Of course, that doesn't work very well. We know that, because as soon as somebody forgets to put something in the script, the whole thing falls apart. So as a result, we use other technologies to do that, and we also then all have to orchestrate it all. So we have a lot of moving parts here, and that was certainly the case with this customer, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And, you're also, for a lot of these organizations and maybe even people that are on this call right now, is, you're taking from your data engineers and your resources and saying, you know what, I get to stitch together Terraform and Git together, and I'm going to make some GitHub actions, and I'm going to do these things, and you're chipping away at it. You're not building an enterprise solution. You're building enough to be able to do what you need to do, right? So it's just
Mm,
good enough, and it's a constant work in progress. You could either, some organizations, and I think in the use case that we're talking about, you end up having a team of people whose only job is to maintain this solution, which is a very stitched together solution. Um,
yeah.
and it's a constant work in progress.
And here's the so like I said, we wanted to show people how this actually works in reality, what it can be like. And it's funny, actually, I was just thinking about it, Keith, that I remember many years ago I turned around to somebody when an iPad came out for the first time, and I regrettably said back then, well, that'll never take off, because what purpose does it serve? Right?
Right.
And then I think I'm now probably the proud owner of God knows how many of them, right? And I actually think in many respects your product sits in this camp, and that's because until you actually see what it does, you don't realize what you're missing. Do you know what I mean? Or how
Yeah.
easy it can be. There is an assumption, just like I had with my iPad, that I had to travel with a book, with a note, with my laptop, and with a notebook for my meetings, right? And then I remember myself trotting around New York once, and I just had my little iPad mini with me instead of all of this crap that I was carrying around previously. So yeah, so let's show people, and interestingly, we're going to show people a demo. When we talked about this, you said, "No, got 20 minutes of demo to show them," and I said, "Well, I think they'll get pretty bored after 20 minutes, no matter how exciting a demo is. It's 20 minutes is a long time to be watching somebody else on a keyboard, especially when we're all used to doing it ourselves." So you said, "Well, how long do you want?" And I said, "Well, can you do it in 5?" And then you said yes. And I was being quite flippant when I said 5, but here we have it. So the challenge is what are you going to show us in 5 minutes?
Yeah. So I'm going to leading up to showing you, I'm going to just kind of go through a few things to kind of, I guess you could say, set the foundation for everybody. So, what we're going to show is our solution called dynamic delivery. So, what is dynamic delivery? Everything we just kind of showed before, all those parts and pieces, right? All brought into one solution, right? So within this black box solution, we're going to have the Git integration, database change management, schema versioning, CI/CD pipeline automation, approval workflows, orchestration, rollback and recovery capabilities, governance and testing. So all of those things that were being stitched together, all within one solution. So dynamic delivery is a Snowflake native app. It is available in the marketplace, and you get free 500 minutes a month for an organization. And after that, it's Snowflake credits. So that's a little bit about what dynamic delivery is. Let's show it. To your point, Keith, proof's in the pudding, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
so, oh, actually, I got ahead of myself. So to your point, Chris, I just briefly talked about this. Snowflake has capabilities, right? It has these three capabilities that we leverage in it. And then with dynamic delivery, we add everything else, right? So
Yeah.
within that black box, we give you a whole um, solution all wrapped in together, leveraging the capabilities that Snowflake has. As Snowflake brings new capabilities to the table, we leverage them
Yeah.
and so forth. So it's really
And,
that partnership.
and interestingly here as well, is sometimes we get the question, well, why did Snowflake invest, in DataOps.live over this 3-year period? And well, this is the reason why. Yeah,
Right.
quite frankly. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
So
Okay.
yeah. So what are you going to show us, Keith?
All right. So time for the demo time. Some demonstration, see it
Do I
in
need to
action.
start a clock? I'm wondering whether I do start.
No, you can count. I'm gonna be 5 minute-ish. I talk a lot, so it'll probably be some time for Keith talking. But what am I gonna do? So
Okay.
here I have something I'm calling, I mean, many of you out there probably have a platform, you give it a name. I'm calling this one the Orion platform. And we have a Snowflake account that has these databases, right? I kind of set up, a lot of people are familiar with the terminology or the around medallion. So I've got a bronze database, silver, gold, and a common database. So I'm going to go into the Snowflake account. I'm going to go into the marketplace. I'm going to activate dynamic delivery. So put that onto my Snowflake account. I am then going to establish a CI/CD pipeline over the gold prod database. So, one thing with our solution is that, you might have different teams doing different aspects of your overall data solution. You might have people working on bronze, on silver. You might want to divide things up. So you can establish these pipelines, and we call projects, on a variety of different things. And for today's exercise, though we're going to put the solution over the top of the Snowflake account, I'm going to focus on first establishing a pipeline on an existing the gold prod database. And I use the word key is existing, is that you don't have to just use a solution on a greenfield Snowflake account. If you have something you've been using 3 years, 5 years, whatever it might be, we can easily establish the CI/CD pipeline on what you already have today, baseline that. Then what I'm
And
going to
just
do, go
can
ahead.
I just, I mean,
Yeah.
this might be stating the bleeding obvious, as we say in the UK, but for those who are not super familiar with CI/CD, what is a pipeline? Just in case there's anybody here that's new to this topic.
Yeah. So a pipeline is what you're going to want to execute, right? So you might say, I want to deploy this DDL. I want to then run this test over that DDL. In our scenario, we're standing up ephemeral databases. So, well, I want to deploy this to dev or a feature branch. What we're doing is doing a zero copy clone, right? So we're going to take your prod, we're going to create a zero copy clone of that database, and we're going to execute against that. So a pipeline are what are the actions and activities that you want to execute. So it could be create a table, right, or a bunch of tables, run these tests, do the merge, and then end. And if you want to over time say, I want to do a test, or maybe you want to update a data catalog, right? Those pipelines are where you ingrain what it is that you want to execute at the time of execution.
All right. So basically, in summary, if I'm trying to get this right, you're going to install the native app. Okay. You're going to fingerprint, to use a layman's term. right? The environment that's there, that's already there. And then you're going to take that and you're going to deploy it to another environment, and then you're going to run some automated testing to make sure that it actually is what we were expecting. Is that right?
Exactly.
Great.
Exactly. So
Okay. And we use my favorite feature to do this, of course. You mentioned it, zero copy clone, right?
yes,
Although I say that's the favorite feature. It isn't. Zero copy clone just provides the data snapshot effectively for each of these environments to operate on, doesn't it, in an effective way. The actual fingerprinting of that environment is actually where the a lot of the real intelligence is, isn't it? Which
yeah,
is, yeah, and you're going to share this, which is great. So I'll shut up.
no, exactly. I think zero copy cloning is probably one of the most underutilized solutions within Snowflake that can do some amazing things. So, but yes, let's get out of
Maybe not
here.
anymore. Maybe not anymore.
So I'm going to get out of here and I'm going to go into the Snowflake database. So here we have the Snowflake account that we have, and we can see in here we have the databases that we were just talking about for our Orion platform. So what I'm going to do is going to go into the Snowflake marketplace. So if I go to the data products within my Snowflake account, go to the marketplace, and I'm just going to search for data ops in general, just to kind of show you we have multiple solutions, but today we're talking about dynamic delivery. So I'm just going to click on dynamic delivery. It's going to bring into that screen. And I'm simply going to say, I want to get dynamic delivery. Now, one thing I'm going to point out here for those, you do need to be somebody who has the right permissions in your Snowflake account to do this part. So if you have account administrative capabilities or you know the person who it is, but you can see here, we're basically telling you what it is this is going to be doing, right? And so you want to make sure whoever's working with this or doing this particular part has those capabilities. But I'm going to agree. And can you continue? Because on this Snowflake account, I have account access. So here I'm just going to say, let's get it. And so what it's going to do now is it's going to execute the install. So you can see the three little dots are running in the background. And so it's going to provision this to our Snowflake account. And I've done it 100 times prior to this, and it'll be this one time that'll be. And so what
No,
this will,
we've had our glitch today, which was
yeah,
your
it's already
Zoom
been.
crashing.
So once this has been provisioned to our account, it'll let us know that we have had success. It's like watching a boil or a hot pot try to boil.
Yeah, so while that's going on, it might be worth mentioning actually just a little bit about native apps, just if folks are not familiar with that on Snowflake. So a native app runs natively within your Snowflake account. Um, it's an interesting concept because it doesn't expose any of your data back to the people that have created the native app unless you give them explicit permissions to access that data. Like it says, it runs entirely within your own account. But the architecture that underpins this is slightly different, isn't it, Keith? Because the native app is effectively a runner. It is a stub, if you like, which basically does the orchestration, isn't it, within the account. And your SaaS platform then manages
And
the
there's,
configurations,
yeah,
the Git configurations, and the pipeline configs, doesn't it, centrally?
exactly. There's a combination of a SaaS platform and the native app, and like you said, so that all of the execution is running on your Snowflake account and not necessarily, you having to stand up an EC2 and an AWS or, having to stand up any other type of compute for it. And of course, this is the one time where this is being extremely slow. slow. I've done this like 5 times already today, and I'm not sure why this one time it wants to
Have
be.
you run out of credits, Keith? I
It's
can
just
sell you some
it's
more.
the demo god saying, "Hey, you're doing a webinar. Let's really slow Keith down here."
Well, I'm wondering while that's running whether it's worth covering off any of the other topics. Actually, I don't know whether that would steal our own thunder here or not. I mean, basically, well, actually, while Keith's talking about, well, while we're waiting for this, um, so so interestingly, Snowflake are actually.
Hey, there
Oh,
it is. Okay,
oh, I
cut it.
don't get to talk about my next topic. Okay, that's it. Okay,
It
never
was
mind
just
then.
keeping us under pressure,
It was
right? So
checking to see whether we were going
yeah,
to fumble or not, and then obviously we weren't. So
exactly. So
it's
we're
been working
done.
well.
So
Yeah.
to prove that it's done, right, I'm going to go into my apps here and we'll say, hey, look, dynamic delivery has been added. I go to the database. You'll also see we have some stuff there. So we have implemented dynamic delivery into our account. So I'm not going to conclude that in my 5 minutes. I'm going to blame
Mm,
that one on Snowflake.
okay. I suppose. I
So
suppose.
so you can see for our gold database, we do have a business schema that has tables, views, all there in it. So let's go ahead and now put this into our pipeline. So I'm going to go into now the app. So here's one thing just to note. Not only did you get access to dynamic delivery, you have entire access to our entire DataOps.live platform. Though today we're really focusing on dynamic delivery, those 500 minutes and everything else is everything else you can do. So it's just not in the dynamic delivery area, which is what we're going to do today. So I'm going to execute our dynamic delivery. It's kind of like a wizard per se, right? It's like, great. Now you want to stand up a project in a pipeline over the top of gold, and we called it Orion. So a group is like, I'm going to put it in the Orion group. You might say this is my gold group, my whatever it is as your organizations are, you can arrange these and organize these the way you want. So I'm going to put this into our Orion group. So here's our Orion platform, and I'm going to just call this gold. So our gold database in the Orion platform, I'm going to use an existing Snowflake account, which is this one. Now, for sake of time, I did kind of set up some of my credentials already, but you can see you can set up username, password, key pairs, OAuth, however your organization is secured. And I'm going to continue that. So now what it's doing is it went into the Snowflake databases and it's saying, what do you see? I see these databases. And I'm saying, okay, we're going to want to take the gold prod is the one we're focusing on. It's now saying, okay, on the left-hand side is what is in Snowflake. On the right-hand side is what we're going to put into our data ops, into our project. So we only wanted to do the business because, as everybody know, public comes with every database. So we only care about the business schema, and that's what we're going to put into our gold project. And I'm going to hit continue. What this is now going to do, you can see the wheel spinning in the lower right hand corner. It's actually going into Snowflake and getting all of the metadata of that specific database. And it's going to start converting all of that metadata into all the configurations and all the files that are needed for our overall CI/CD solution, right? So populating the Git repository with all the YAML files and everything that needs to be done. I don't have to be an expert in YAML. I don't have to be an expert in Git and everything else that I need to do. All of that is being done right now in the background. And so it basically says the infrastructure as code configurations are basically, now we're ready to do our dry run, right? Is to actually test that. It basically configured it already for us. So we have the entire platform ready to go. Let's do a dry run. Now, this is just basically telling us what it is going to do. And I'm going to just kind of walk us through it. So let's go view that pipeline. So as we can see in the upper left gold, we have created in the environment for our gold database. We have a repository, a Git repository, all the merging, everything else we want to do. And right now the pipeline is executing, right? So what is the pipeline doing? It's getting all of those files and getting everything ready to deploy. We talked about this, a feature branch, right? Which is doing in the background, it's going to do a zero copy clone, and it's going to deploy all the objects that we just got from prod so that we can make sure that we did retrieve and pull everything out that was in our prod environment appropriately. We can see that that process is done. And if I actually click on these, you can see everything that it's done. So everything that's being done in data ops is logged. So you have all that auditing and all of that history completely available to you. Even if when things fail, you get what the failures were. Right. So I'm going to go back now to I lost my mouse to here, and we can see here it's setting up Snowflake. This is now populating that zero copy clone we call a feature branch, right? I'm going to show here, you can see what it's doing. It's taking all those artifacts, and I'm just going to kind of watch it here for a minute so you can kind of see what it's doing in the background. And what it's doing, I don't know if we'll see if I can time it, is you see we copied gold prod. We're going to create a feature branch right there. Data ops gold feature branch for the gold, right? So though we have this production database with all our objects, we're creating that feature branch, which is zero copy clone of those same objects, right? So we can see here, I now have a feature branch, um, tables and everything like that. If I go back into here, and we should see that this is also successful. We created that feature branch. Great. So now we have two environments that should be exactly the same, right? And so we now have essentially zero copy cloned, made it a copy, deployed those objects to it, and make sure that all's the same. So if I wanted to, I could go to my repository and I can sit here and say, here's that gold branch that we had, right? I can go in here. I can see all of the files, all the YAML files for the things that I created. All of this has been done um, automatically. I haven't had to go and maintain or type in or create any of these YAML files. They're all there. And then if I wanted to, I could then do a merge. And I just kind of want to show this. I'm not going to go and full on try to deploy these just because of time, but the you can sit here and say, oh, I want this person to be assigned to do the approve, or this person to review it, or so you have these abilities to then create the right level of workflow that you want, add stuff into those pipelines, whether it could be tests and so on for there. So, and then again, create the merge request and then execute the merge automatically. But at this point, right now, I basically have an enterprise grade CI/CD solution for Snowflake ready to go with my team. Everything that we talked about stitching together is all right here at your fingertips, ready to go. And even if I wanted to, now that I've done that test, I can break it down. I can sit there and say, good, I don't want that feature branch staying out there. And even if when you're in your own um, world, in your own account, you're going to be leveraging these feature branches. They're like your sandboxes. People can be working on their feature branches, merging into, like, say, a dev environment or eventually to a QA environment. But you don't want to leave those feature branches out there in that infrastructure. I was on a project and we decided, like, you know what, we'll keep them out there till the next release. So the next release, we would tear it down. Here, I can manually tear it down, but you can also automate and schedule that as well. So for the sake here, I'm going to now say, let's tear down that feature branch that we did. And let's go back into Snowflake and let's see if we can actually see it disappear. I'll just keep refreshing this and we should see that the feature branch should eventually um, disappear off of the table. Let me see how it's doing here. You can see it's getting all of those YAML files and it's going to remove all of that. It's because I'm watching it. That's why when you deploy your code, don't watch it. It goes slower. Clock seems to go. There we go. So now if I go back to the database and we refresh that, we see it's delivered. It's deployed. So that was probably a little bit more than 5 minutes, but I did a lot of talking. But in that amount of time, we basically now have all the capabilities we talked about in that stitching at the beginning that our client use case was talking about, ready for us to go at our fingertips, and everything right here at and if I wanted to do this again for my bronze layer and my silver layer, I just rinse and repeat that process. So you figure in probably another 10, if I wasn't on 10, 15 minutes, I could basically have bronze, silver, gold, full enterprise ready CI/CD solutions for my teams ready to go. And so, yeah, there's the demo we had for you guys. Um, Well, let me bring
Yeah.
it back to the slides. Anything you want to ask, Chris, or were you completely amazed by that?
I wasn't completely amazed, but that's only because I've seen it before, and you can only be completely amazed so many times. But it is. But I will say I am, as always, super impressed with this. The product is very, very easy to use. Anybody can get started with this very, very quickly. And I think what's very nice about it doesn't, you could go to the full extent of the enterprise wide workflow, at one end of it and fully collaborate across an enterprise. Or if you have a small team, you can just use it for collaborating across your own team, or even using it independently. And interestingly, maybe that's probably a good point to maybe
One thing
mention that.
I
Sorry,
just
go on.
want to show you something that I meant to show it. I'm going to quickly show it. If I was to get stuck, we have our little AI because we do use AI as well, right? That you can even ask this any question like, so, how can I add a new feature branch, right? And then this you can have a full on, I mean, I've had a full on conversation with this thing sometimes it's pretty funny, right? But it'll sit there and give you, so if even if you get stuck and you want to understand how I can do something, um, we have AI built in, and our abilities with AI are ever more increasing and so much more to come in the near future. But so we too leverage AI within the solution. All right.
Yeah. So Snowflake. So yeah. So like I was saying, this is very easy to use. It's multifaceted as well in terms of, you can use it for full, absolutely end to end, fully blown CI/CD workflow processes, or you can use it for, relatively lightweight individual kind of DevOps type operations, right? Um, and interestingly, Snowflake is Snowflake is your biggest stress tester, I think is
Yeah.
probably the way of putting it, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, for those of you who have been lucky enough to go to Summit last year, I think this year it was in San Francisco. We have 7,000 people at our user summit, and we run hundreds of labs. So people are invited. The labs are free for attendees, yeah, just like AWS World and all that kind of good stuff. Um, but as you can imagine, is most of these labs are built by sales engineers who are out in the field most of the time, and consultants, and they don't have the time to basically package all of this stuff up. And that's where DataOps.live comes into it. So we use DataOps.live to package up, fingerprint, basically generate the pipelines from the environments that are created, the labs that people generate, and then they're deployed multiple times on demand at the event itself. And we don't have weeks to spend preparing the events for this. We turn up 2 days before these events, and most of that's spent like setting stands up and things like that. There's no such thing as having access to your lab environments yet, God forbid. So you can imagine there's a lot of pressure around this, and we trust DataOps.live to deliver this, and they do flawlessly every year and have done now for a good couple of years. So what I'm saying here is you can really very much trust them. They do what they say on the tin, as we like to say. I think that's probably all we need to cover today. I think we're not far from running out of time actually for Q&A as well. Although the Q&A has been happening as we've been going on. Keith, do you want to just go over some of the key takeaways that you want people to walk away with today, and then we'll just I'll bring it home after that.
Yeah. So again, real quickly go through these native to Snowflake, right? We are built for Snowflake. We partner with Snowflake, so no need to stitch or stand up separate infrastructure, or anything else you need to do. We're directly working with Snowflake. You can deploy with speed without losing control, and that's one thing that's really important for organizations who want to go faster and faster. Is you can go as fast as you can click these buttons and schedule some of these things to run and reuse across your different teams. We're built for the enterprise, right? Those organizations who are global, that use case we brought up was a global use case, maybe even have multiple Snowflake accounts and you want to reach across Snowflake accounts, different domains, decentralized data mesh. We don't care. We're really, as we said, on those, when you're talking about a hands-on lab for Snowflake and you get 7,000 people, that's a large scale. AI ready by design. AI is a huge aspect of what we do and a focus of ours going forward. People are doing, I showed database stuff here, but whether you're doing Cortex, if you want to do Streamlit apps, or as Snowflake is going, we're going to go, and obviously AI is a huge part of that. Works with what you already have in Snowflake. So as I showed, if you've already have stuff in Snowflake, don't worry and sit there and say, oh my God, how am I going to quote unquote port over, migrate over? We have had some organizations that are using their own solution. It might just take one little schema and say, well, let me just try it with this schema or one database, and kind of like to say crawl, walk, run. You don't have to throw everything you have away out. You can kind of evolve right on top of what you already have. And the big thing, again, free. You don't have to procure anything. You go to the Snowflake marketplace, hit the get button, and be underway. And then eventually, if you're using more than 500 minutes a month, you just use credits. That's what I have, Chris. If you want to take it home.
Yeah, so hopefully you've all got a pretty clear understanding of its capabilities. The key thing here, right, is quite frankly, is I can't think of a really good I can't think of any reason actually, let alone a really good reason as to why you wouldn't want to try this. And there are two options for you. Option one is to take a free hands-on lab. The link is provided here, DataOps.live/hands-on lab. There are all two of them. I think there's two or three of them there, right? There's the frictionless CI/CD, and then there's the frictionless DBT as well, isn't there? I think that you can take there. Those labs actually execute on a Snowflake account that's owned by DataOps.live. So you can treat that as a sandpit, but it's not your environment, it's their environment, and you can muck around with it to your heart's content. The other mechanism is to try it in your own environment. So you can just install it from the marketplace in your own environment. You can see how easy that is. There is a prerequisite for doing that. When you install it, you will need to have the account permissions required to do so, which is typically account level, or you've been assigned permissions to install native applications. But that is also a great way of getting hands-on with it. It's also a nice way of getting hands-on with it, of course, in a live environment where you can actually utilize it to actually increase your own productivity to start with. So yeah, it's something that I highly recommend. And you get 500 credits free a month. What can you do with 500 free credits, Keith?
500 minutes. No, just kidding. So I think it really depends on, so those minutes are whether you're doing development time or execution time. So if you obviously build pipelines that have 100 tests and do all this stuff, and those pipelines run in minutes, well, every time you run those pipelines, you're chewing away minutes. Like you just saw there, I barely used any minutes for what I was doing. So those minutes can carry as far as whatever it is that you're using for with running your pipelines and doing your development. So again, like we said at the beginning, this is for the whole breadth of DataOps.live, not just for the CI/CD. So, we have DBT capabilities. So if you're building DBT capabilities, and some models in there, those can take up more minutes. So, it really varies from organization to organization how far you're going to go. But what I will say is, you can more than likely do quite a bit of getting started. Even like you said, from a CI/CD perspective, you want to take a small project, you can go quite a ways with that. The organizations are really burning those 500 minutes. They're doing some pretty advanced. They've been using our product for quite some time. But to your point, you could go quite a ways, and you can get started today with like, hello, let me just try doing a CI/CD pipeline on for this area. And the odds are you're probably going to not burn up those 500 minutes unless you
Yeah.
throw,
So
five people at it. Yeah,
short answer is you can get a lot. You can
you could
get a
get a
long,
lot.
long way with 500 minutes. Is the
Yeah,
short answer. All right,
exactly.
and also, if you want to know more about this, regardless of the hands-on labs and the free, if you want to know about what this, how this fits in your environment, if you are too shy to ask questions on the chat here, or you come up with good questions after the event when you're playing around with it, please, please, please make sure that you get in touch, right?
Yep.
And you can basically have a conversation with one of the solution engineers, which will be one of the DataOps folks or one of us on the Snowflake side, or probably both, you never know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, is there anything else, Keith, we need to cover before we let these folks go?
Nope, I think so. I think I'm gonna reach out to Tony, like phone a friend. I think all the questions have been answered. I don't know if there's anything else, Tony, that hasn't been answered, or if you wanted to say anything.
Yeah, so far the questions that were asked, we've already covered.
Okay.
Perfect. Great. So I thank everybody. We will send out probably a follow-up email. I'll put these this contact information, the link to the hands-on lab, and the link to the marketplace for everybody. Again, thank you very much for your time. And now everybody go and take a hands-on lab or go download the application. Thanks a
All
lot,
right.
Chris. I appreciate your time as well.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.